Are You Nuts? A Tom and Scott Mystery, Book 7. Author Mark Richard Zubro. St. Martin's Press, New York. Eric Aust, narrator. Chapter 12. I hurried to the library. No one was in the open area near the checkout desk. I approached Meg's office, but stopped when I heard raised voices. One was Meg's, the other, I realized after a moment, was Carolyn's. Meg was saying, "I just came to get some personal things. I did not design this visit as a confrontation." "You can't be here." "I'm leaving in a few moments." "What has turned you into a raving loony, Carolyn?" "You're always more sensible than most." "I've been trying to remember the past," Carolyn said. "I've been trying to piece together why there have been 2 murders. "And what have you come up with?" "Each of the people has some connection to awful things that happened years ago. Some seem like fairly mild, tawdry gossip, and I haven't found something back then that could be lethal now." "And that insight leads you to conclude—" "I don't know." Carolyn paused, then said, "You know Belutha was hit with Smith's comprehensive encyclopedia? The killer had to be somebody who had access to the schools and wouldn't be regarded as suspicious." "Someone got in here again?" Meg asked. "And took the book and brought it over to the new school?" Carolyn said. "Anybody can get into this school until late. There's some kind of activity here almost every night and on weekends. Even you, Carolyn, have a lot of easy access. The school's alarm system works only after all extracurricular and community activities are done, which is sometimes not until after midnight." That explained how easy it was to get into Grove or Cleveland, but wouldn't there have been a gauntlet to go through to get into the new school? We didn't have security guards or metal detectors before this, and usually such devices aren't put in to protect a building after hours. Mostly they're set up during the day to keep kids from hurting each other. "The police are checking phone records," Carolyn said. "Belutha started making a lot of phone calls after 9 o'clock last night. The police are tracking down who all those were, too, and they're going to talk to everybody." "Well, she didn't call me." "They think she may have received some calls as well. She is call waiting, so she wouldn't have missed an incoming." "So what if she received calls?" Meg asked. "That they were the night she was murdered probably has significance. Why'd she make the calls?" "The police aren't sure. The 5-year-old said there was a mysterious visitor yesterday evening." I wondered if it wasn't about time to hie myself to my lawyer to make sure they didn't accuse me of something, but I wanted to hear all this, and I wanted to see Meg, and I wanted to interrogate Carolyn. "Why don't we talk about you as a possible suspect?" Meg said. "I beg your pardon, Carolyn. There are no secrets around here. You've been part of this district a long time. You've been in the thick of fights. Well, that comes with the job. You've lived here for many years. You always act like you're so far above it all, but that hatred around here hasn't missed you. I thought about you in the past as well." "What does that mean?" "Carolyn, you've known Jerome for years, as a teacher, as a low-level administrator, as his principal, and as his superintendent. You were close many years ago." "We haven't been for years." "And why is that?" "People drift apart. Something happened many years ago. I've been trying to piece it together. I called my old friend, Agnes Davis, to ask about it. She vaguely recalls you took several graduate classes with him. We used to drive to DePaul together. So what? Maybe you were more discreet than most. Save your baseless suspicions for someone who cares. Nobody suspects you of murder, Carolyn, because you're the above-it-all superintendent. An old affair gone sour might make an interesting motive for murder." I'd only heard Meg turn on a friend like this once before, and that was me in the corridor of the courthouse. Meg was still speaking. "You knew all these people. You weren't in their churches, so that isn't the connection. Were you trying to influence the union election? Trying to get in a candidate who was favorable to you or easy to deal with? Did you get secret calls from Jerome?" "I talked to both candidates. I always do. I can't believe you're trying to make something out of such nothing." What did Jerome promise? Or maybe he struck you as a nitwit, and you figured you could manipulate him the easiest. And then when he wasn't amenable to your suggestions, you bashed him. What for? I have no motive. What happened all those years ago? Were you lovers? Don't be absurd. I'm real curious to see the relationship between all the players. There is no relationship. For the first time since I'd known her, Carolyn's voice sounded with a tremor. Of what? Fear? Deep emotion about something. No, Meg said. I imagine there is. I don't know if the police are going to follow up any of this. With the second murder, they might have to. Unless they try to pin it on me. Maybe they should. Carolyn sounded spiteful and mean. I have no alibi for last night. The cops checked. I was at home, alone. How about you, Carolyn? Do you have a rock-solid alibi? You shouldn't have come here today, Meg. You're obviously overwrought. I suggest you go home. Let's let a little time pass before we decide on your future. Until you came in here today, I thought we were friends. You won't have to worry about my coming back to work. I've written out my resignation. I said, please don't quit. I stepped into the room. They both turned to me and each gave me a distinctly annoyed look. We're having a private conversation, Carolyn said. I've wanted to talk to both of you about the murder. And we've wanted to speak to you. We all turned at this new voice. Baxter Dickinson, the River's Edge detective, stood in the doorway. We all gave him distinctly annoyed looks. This did not make him disappear in a puff of smoke. He called over his shoulder. They're in here. Moments later, he was joined by his partner, Leonard Roswald. He said, Mr. Mason, if you could follow us, we have a few questions to ask you. There wasn't any point in fighting about it. I trailed after them to the science office. No one sat out in the corridor waiting to be talked to. Roswald began. Mr. Mason, we understand that you met with Mrs. Muffin last night? I didn't bother to carry on about how did they find out or make nonsensical comments about demanding my rights. I started with everything Lydia Marquez had told me and finished with my visit to Belutha. What time did you leave Mrs. Muffin's house? About 9. You have any proof of that? My lover can tell you what time I got home. I saw you guys on television, Dickinson said. I've seen Scott Carpenter pitch a few times. I'm not so sure how interested I am now in seeing him play. That's because you started betting on baseball games and he cost you money, Roswell said. I told you betting on baseball had the worst probability, statistics, and predictability of any sport. Can we get on with it? I asked. You're in a hurry? I want to talk to Meg. We've tried talking to her once about this new murder. Your lawyer has her well trained. She said nothing. We'll be talking to her again with her lawyer present if necessary. Right now, we're concerned about you. I need to go. I got up and walked toward the door. You'd arrest me, except you've traced her movements after I left her. Dickinson nodded. But you may need to go with us to the station, he said. Do you want to talk here or there? Look, try those NYPD blue tricks on someone else. On that show, they would seldom solve a case if the people they brought in for questioning simply exercised their right to demand a lawyer. With their mixture of bullying and wheedling, the cops on the show convinced many a poor sap to give himself up. I knew I didn't have to stay. We need to go over your statement, Dickinson said. With my lawyer present from this point on, goodbye. They did not shoot me in the back for trying to escape. I'd wasted half an hour with them. No one was in the library. I walked over to the district office. Mavis told me Carolyn had put out the word that she wanted to talk to me. I sat in her office. She barely glanced in my direction. She drummed her fingers on her desk. How long were you listening to Meg and me? Long enough to hear you both accuse each other of having possible motives for murder based on something that happened in the past. After listening to you and Meg, I'm not sure who or what to believe. As an administrator, you've been decent, but as a friend, Meg's been wonderful. She didn't look like she wanted to talk to you. No, she didn't, I admitted. We could do this as a trade. I give you information, you give me information. Lydia and me, Belutha and me, Carolyn and me, all sharing. I could have my own personal support group. I said, we could try it. Why did the police want to talk to you? I was the mystery person who was at Belutha's house. Why'd you go there? Lydia Marquez gave me a tip about the fights among the three friends. I wanted to follow it up. Who fought? Well, I wasn't sure who I trusted at the moment. I wanted information, and if I had to give some to get it, fine. The police knew everything I was going to say already. I gave her the information I'd gleaned about Lydia, Belutha, and Jerome. I'm surprised, Carolyn said. I never knew any of this. Really? The doubt in my voice approached the sarcastic. Tom, we've gotten along well, but I don't think you should try and take advantage of that. You said it yourself when you saw your name on the chart. You'd go after everybody. That's what I'm doing. Why were you and Meg fighting? I thought you were friends. Does a superintendent ever really have friends? Yeah, I think a superintendent can have friends. There's no need to hunker down in an office and pretend the world is out to get you. Did you really talk to Jerome and Seth about the election? You must have eavesdropped on nearly the whole conversation. Yes. Remember, we were going to trade information. It's your turn. Was she going to go back on her word? You said you had information for me. I did talk to both Jerome and Seth. If I can see a way of easing relations between the district and the union, I'm interested. She gave me a grim smile. Here's a tip for you. Either one of those two would have been bad for the union. They both quite cheerfully promised to give away the store. Why do you? I'm not really sure. I think they were planning to use me in their campaigns. What on earth for? An endorsement from the superintendent can't have much effect in a union election. Yes, but they didn't seem to know that. It seemed very important for them to curry favor with me, although that Seth is totally blind to anything but his transfer policy. He wanted to make all the teachers in the district rotate assignments. Is he nuts? I think he'd give up tenure for all the teachers and half the salary raises of the past 20 years just to get his way. What's the background with you and them? Seth, I don't know. While I was working on my doctorate, Jerome was taking some administrative classes. We drove to school together for a couple of semesters. We became friends of sorts. We talked about religion sometimes. I even attended his church once or twice, but I couldn't get into their intensity or fervor. He seemed disappointed, but not heartbroken. And that was it. We drifted apart after that. That hardly seems a terrible secret that needs to be withheld at the price of politeness and friendship. Proving the absence of an affair is nearly impossible. Meg was snarling at me from the moment I entered her office. Why? I asked her. She told me to leave her alone. That is not like her. Yes. Were you supposed to talk to Jerome the night of the PTA meeting? I was going to meet with both of them. Did you? As you know, things got out of hand. I had no time. Carolyn could help no more. I left. I hunted for Meg, but didn't find her. When I asked Georgette if she had seen her, Georgette looked hurt. She turned her back on me and walked away. I'm sure she's still too upset to talk, I said. When things calm down, she'll be thinking more clearly. After spending a few more minutes reassuring Georgette, I wandered to my classroom. I entered wearily. I stood at the door and checked as best I could the placement of everything. Nothing seemed out of order. So far, so good. I stepped further into the room. I saw a note taped to the top of the computer monitor. I opened it with the tips of my fingers, touching it only at the edges. It was from Rita Fleming. She had fixed my computer. I turned it on. It hummed pleasantly and to itself. I tried several CDs and the hard drive. Everything seemed perfectly normal. I tried sitting at my desk. No tacks on the chair. I leaned my elbows on the desk. It crashed to the floor. If this was a comedy sketch, this would be the funny part. I wasn't laughing. Papers covered the floor past the first row of student desks. My coffee cup had spilled its cold contents on a stack of computer disks. While I fumed, I began cleaning the mess. Moments later, the door burst open. It was Kurt. Somebody said there was a terrible noise down here. He pointed to the desk. What is that? I held up one of the legs. It had been sawed off and replaced under the desk, as had the other three. Kurt chuckled. I still wasn't up to the humor of the situation. Kurt, seeing my displeasure, tried to stifle his mirth. He helped me pick up the papers that had scattered when the desk fell. I checked the drawers. They were empty. I no longer had tape, grading pencils, thumbtacks, paper clips, masking tape, overhead markers, and 100 other little items. I've been cleaned out. He came and looked over my shoulder. Together we did a careful examination of the room. Hidden in the bottom of a storage cabinet was a pile of all the materials from the desk. It's a joke, Kurt said. Why would somebody be doing this? It's past the point of silly harassment. Mixing it with death and destruction is poor timing at best. Have you found out anything that would clear Meg? I sat at my desk and began replacing all the items in their proper spots. I wasn't going to waste my time trying to get the police to take fingerprints off them. Finding usable prints would be unlikely. They had murder to deal with. Who cared about practical jokes? I did. I was tired of it. I wasn't sure what the point was of replacing this junk in a broken desk. Perhaps it was reassuring to have stuff in its normal place. I answered Kurt's question about the investigation. After I finished, he said, Your buddy Beatrix cornered me again. Can't we just take her out and shoot her? She keeps things interesting. Beatrix seems to have outdone any person in history for duplicity. I told him about her getting concessions from both candidates. Amazing. I didn't imagine Beatrix had it in her. I knew she was stupid, but boldly stupid. I am impressed. Carolyn was trying to work the candidates, and they her. Jerome and Seth were truly desperate. I filled him in on that part of the conversation. When I finished, he said, I had more hopes for Carolyn. That seems faintly unethical. I thought it was a little out of the ordinary. Then there's the Trevor Thompson mess. The poor guy is scared out of his mind about losing his job. He either needs to find a bigger closet or switch professions. He'd promised either Jerome or Seth his support for guarantees about his job. There are no such guarantees. We know that. He didn't. What is going to happen with the election? I talked to the local office. They left it up to us. For a while I was thinking of making it a hereditary monarchy, but I heard some kindergarten teachers are planning a coup d'etat, and are going to declare a dictatorship. I can hear tanks rumbling in the streets. I wouldn't mess with a bunch of kindergarten teachers. Anybody who can deal with 5 or 6-year-olds on a daily basis is tougher than anybody I know on this planet. So, who killed Jerome and Belutha? Somebody connected these people back in the past. Everybody except for Trevor fits in. I have lots of information, but it is not complete. If it came from Lydia Marquez, I've assumed all along it was distorted. Now I don't know if I should have believed any of it. Would anyone know the total connection? I'm not sure. Normally I'd try Meg, but I haven't been able to talk to her. What can you tell me about this Bjorn Quigley? He was one of the assistant coaches on the football team for a few years. While I was athletic director, I recommended to the administration that he be dropped. Why? He began trying to run everything as if it were a Marine boot camp. Calisthenics were turned into an endurance contest. I think the boys were afraid of him. Fear as a motivation on the athletic field has lost some of its catch in the last few years. What kind of teacher is he? He's got a couple of shop classes. I've never heard of any complaints from him or about him from anybody. He got bent out of shape at the administration when he lost the coaching job. He calmed down some when I told him I was the one who recommended he be let go. What did he do when you told him that? Mostly he looked kind of confused and lost. At one point he did vow to run against me in the next union election. He never did. Too lazy. He got over it. He's just an all-around mope. I don't know. The administration ever say anything to you about him? No, I know he worked in the district as a custodian during the summer for a few years. His family has that feed store business, but he didn't work there that I know of until you told me. He was a custodian. He could have had keys or certainly access to them. Possible. I want to talk to him again. I found Quigley in the shop area. He was sharpening saws. He gazed at me. If it weren't for his face, he'd be put in a calendar for leather and butchman. He had a mature, muscular, sexy look. However, I would have voted against the tattoos on his forearms. He nodded a greeting and picked up another saw and began to hone the edge. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Okay, he continued sharpening. I waited for the loud grating noise to halt for a moment, then asked, Could you stop that a minute? He put the saw down next to him on a bench. The shop area was basically a large garage. One entire section was for car repairs. Each semester, they got a used car business in the community to donate a wreck that the classes would spend the semester taking apart and putting back together. The shop teachers got to use any profit from the sale of the cars to buy more tools for the department. Furnaces for the school took up another quarter of the room. Immediately around Bjorn and me were wooden tables with vices, saws, hammers, and other tools scattered about. On the walls were hooks and nails with the outlines of tools to show which piece of equipment went where. Bjorn's gray steel-rimmed glasses glinted in the fluorescent lights. I noticed his hands were extraordinarily large, plenty big enough to grasp a large encyclopedia. His hands had streaks of oil on them, and they glinted with tiny shards of metal from the saw sharpening. Next to him was a pair of gloves. I said, I heard you were a custodian in the district for several summers. That's why you came down here to talk to me, to discuss jobs? I doubt it. Just say whatever it is you've got to say and be done with it. The murders had to be done by somebody with access to the schools. As a custodian, you'd have had a chance to handle keys. You could have made duplicates or kept a set. Or you could have found ways to circumvent the security system. Not in the new building. Aren't you scheduled to be teaching over there? All the shop teachers in the district rotate. I take a few classes that don't fit into other schedules. I got one here and two there. Depends on your specialty. They don't give us keys or instruction manuals for disarming the alarm system because we're going to have classes over there. You think I killed those two? Did you? No. Where were you last night? With a friend. All night. From 8 in the evening on. Do you have keys to this building? No. I was told your family didn't get along with the Marqueses and the Muffins. That was my parents. But it must have affected you. Why must it have affected me? Because then you would know details that would fill in some of the things I was missing about the background of all the people involved. He almost smiled. My mother and father died in their early 60s of natural causes. My father had a stroke. They were very involved in the community. My dad ran for mayor years ago and lost the election. I think Lydia Marquez was part of the reason he lost. When I moved to town, I wasn't all that interested in the local politics of River's Edge. I spent most of my time running to Chicago, working with various gay organizations on equal rights bills in the Chicago City Council and the Illinois State Legislature. How was she part of it? It was more than working in a campaign. She was younger then, but her tactics were the same. Nowadays, mostly, I happen to agree with her politics. Back then, Lydia was from a faction we didn't want to take control. My father and his friends had been in charge for a long time. River's Edge was like their perfect little small-town America. It didn't make any difference that housing subdivisions were beginning to hem the town in on every side. This was utopia. Lydia was part of the faction who were outsiders, who didn't want to keep it like it had been when we were growing up. Look, what's happened since they gained control? Growth is out of hand. No planning seems to go into anything. Houses are built too densely together. The streets can no longer handle the traffic. Have you tried to get into Orland Park any time on a Saturday? You murdered them because traffic is bad. I guess you must enjoy making sarcastic comments, but do you really think they help you get anywhere? You play all these put-down games, but nobody likes it. Who's nobody? I don't. He picked up a saw and began testing the edge. And is picking up that saw supposed to be some kind of threat? Am I supposed to be impressed with how tough you are and stop asking questions because you can rub your thumb over a sharpened blade? No, actually, I just picked it up at random. It wasn't meant as a threat, but he didn't put it down. What'd you expect me to do? Saw you to death? I'd put that crack in the sarcasm into the spectrum. I'm taking lessons from you. What happened with the election with your dad? People were angry. People's feelings were hurt. My father never forgave them for the lies they told. Lies? That's how they won the election. They made up stuff about my dad. It was like a national election. Rumors went around that he was unfaithful to my mother. My dad was no saint, but he never cheated on my mother. There were rumors started that he was secretly meeting with developers and was going to sell out the community. Of course, when their side won, they couldn't get to the developers soon enough to start plowing under everything this community had ever been. You must be really angry at Lydia and Belutha and Jerome. Yes, but how could you come to the meeting and make those statements that make you sound like a Nazi? I'm very conservative. I can have those beliefs. I agree with Miss Marquez. Unfortunately, I didn't vote for her in the election, but I voted for the other three candidates. They represented changes I think should be made in this district. Trevor Thompson walked in. He and Bjorn exchanged a look. I glanced at Bjorn's ring finger. No little band of gold. I'll be through in a minute, Bjorn said. What's going on here? I asked. Don't talk to him, Trevor said. Secrets in closets, oh my. You two know each other, Bjorn answered. Trevor and I hang out together sometimes. You're gay? I asked Bjorn. He shrugged. Don't talk to him, Trevor said. Will you cut that out, I said. I want to find out what the hell is going on here. Get used to disappointment, Bjorn said. I don't parade my private life in front of anyone. I don't think you should be parading your sexuality in front of everyone. If you kept it quiet, I wouldn't mind. While Bjorn put away all the saws, Trevor stood next to the door. I got no more information about past history from Bjorn. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.